Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Dark Pixel Podcast. My name is Mike.
I'm Landon. I'm Kason.
And today we are going to be talking about a number of news topics. First one, Reggie Fils-Aime did an interview where he talked about the Wii U's failures and how those have led to the successes of the Switch. The Nintendo Switch is going to be going into hardcore production next year. Going to be producing up to 25 to 30 million units. So we're going to reflect on that a little bit, talk about where we were about a year ago with people's projections for the Switch and how we got to where we are. And then we're going to talk about how to put this, a blunder maybe of EA's on EA's part. They tried to address some concerns about microtransactions on a Reddit post. And it is currently, that response is currently the most downvoted post in the history of Reddit.
Like 700,000 downvotes or something.
It's getting real close to that. When the story broke, it was like 340,000, and it's 682,000 right now. So
it gets that momentum once people start hearing about it, and they're like, "Me too." Or just to dislike it for fun. Yeah.
It's unreal. But specifically, want to talk about what that means for the future of microtransactions, whether or not this is starting to hit companies as feedback that they will account for and maybe move away from. Right. Okay, then we'll move into our viewer suggested topics. First one from Anders Bod Mai. How do you feel about games breaking the fourth wall? He goes into an example here, but we'll get to that later. Zels Clemvers asks, do you consider gambling a type of gaming? There's a lot of context to that question we'll also get into a little bit later. Gwip1408 asks, how much does originality count for a game being good? And then we've got last question from Yuns of 5%. Provo. What are some examples of story elements in games that are typically considered bad, but that are actually good to you due to personal experience or subjectivity? He also has a lot of context for that. Something I've actually thought a lot about over the years in how my feelings have changed for certain games after talking to other people about their experiences with them. So very good topics. Let's go ahead and hop into the first one here. So I was reading an article on Destructoid, I believe it was. And I think this was actually originally a CNN interview that Reggie Fils-Aime was doing. And he says,
pretended that they're the ones that did it.
Well, they said speaking to CNN, he said whatever.
Yeah.
So he says, we worked hard for the Nintendo Switch to make it crystal clear what the proposition is. It's a home system that you can take on the go, play anywhere with anyone, and that's resonating. We've addressed a lack of games with the Nintendo Switch. Having a steady pace of new launches is critical. Whether it's the big companies like Electronic Arts or whether it's a smaller independent developer, we need those companies to create content to support us. We have that now with Nintendo Switch. And he was responding directly to them asking about how the Switch succeeded where the Wii U had struggled so much. So the marketing is definitely a big part of the difference. I don't know if you guys remember the Wii U commercials, and by you guys I mean by you guys I mean the viewers.
People think dubstep is, and it is weird.
It's hard to speak for like the general public a lot of times when we're in more of a niche gaming community and we speak with people who really understand these terms on a deeper level than most people do, right? So, when I would hear things like people are confused about whether this is a new console or it's like some kind of accessory of the Wii, I would laugh at that. Be like,
that doesn't resonate with me. Yeah.
How could you not know that?
It was pretty damn clear.
Apparently that was a problem.
Right.
To what scale that was a problem, I can't say, but I think from the choice of the name of the system, because think of how resonating the Switch, even just in its name, is. How that automatically, with the sound, with the name, and with what they show, Like you perfectly understand what it is and what it does. It's just like so absolutely perfectly clear. Like,
it controls
oh
the
my
lights
goodness,
in the house, right? Like you can switch them off. Maybe.
Yeah, you got it.
Switch. Home automation's gonna be big.
In comparison to like Wii U marketing, I'm trying to remember back on it in the commercials and stuff.
Wii U marketing.
Like
okay, so the biggest difference to me with the Switch marketing and Wii U marketing is like when you market. I was actually just talking to Matt about this, but you guys remember when we had that YouTube meetup last August or October, and they were talking about the idea of personas. And not in a video game sense, right? A persona, like who are you making this thing for? Who's your YouTube channel for? What's your product for? And then it's literally supposed to be a specific person. Like YouTube was like, think of it, give them a name, give them a job, give them an age, fill in all the information about this person, and this should be who all your stuff is addressing the concerns of, and that's how you have like a cohesive direction.
And if you can't do that, then you don't know your audience. So it's kind of like the point.
And it used to be until like the late 90s, most companies just kind of were like, this is for a guy who works in an office, but also for a person who is a student at a school or whatever, right? But not so granular as one person. The Wii U, I feel like, was still marketing without the concept of a persona. It's like, who's the Wii U for? Well, in the commercials, you saw little kids and you saw the parents of the kids. And then they were all palling around, and you just saw like a crazy variety of people, which is literally like, this is, like you said, everybody. With the Switch, we can tell, especially in the early marketing materials, it's like, this is freaking for a 20-something millennial who lives in Los Angeles, who works at the coffee shop, in the city, who parties with friends at night. Sometimes they like to hang out in these hipstery spots. You know what I mean? It's like,
but you still have responsibilities. Like you may have a dog, or you have to go for a walk, and you might need it on the go. You know, like they're showing, they're speaking directly to a very specific person here.
And I think that's a lot of the genius in the way it's been marketed so far. That's not the whole story, obviously, but I think that's like an important element of marketing. Who's this for? Who is this for? Can you say a specific person? And with the Switch, I think you can. With the Wii U,
you couldn't quite do that. That's a good point. I would also say that what I found really interesting was that the Wii was marketed towards a whole bunch of people, but it was producing a lot of like nostalgia games, right? Like a lot of remakes or a lot of sequels and a lot of content that Nintendo's been doing this for over a decade now. They're just kind of living off of the nostalgia for their older games. But they weren't marketing it towards the people who that nostalgia should be marketed towards. Like there was something really interesting when I think, was it Tetsuya Nomura or was it somebody else? Maybe it was, I can't remember who it was. Somebody from Square Enix was talking about the Final Fantasy VII remake, how it's been 20 years since 7. And they were saying that it's time now. Like the people are that age now to where this would resonate if we made it now, right? It wasn't the time before. We can't wait too long. It'll be too late later. This is the time. And if you think people may have been 12 or 10 when they first played Final Fantasy VII, and then 20 years later, now they're 30, right? And with what Nintendo's doing, with like the way that they're treating Breath of the Wild as being so revolutionary, similar to Ocarina of Time, or this new sandbox Mario game Odyssey that is like similar to Mario 64, which we hadn't seen, I guess, in Sunshine. It's been a while. But they're trying to reintroduce these concepts. And if you don't have that, obviously you're going to market it towards someone who is the age of, they played it back in the 90s, and now they're 30, and they live, and they're in LA or whatever, the person you described, right? But that's the point. Like it only makes sense that they would do that. If you're going to market towards nostalgia, you need to find the people who are the most nostalgic towards your product. And Nintendo did not do that with the Wii U at all. They totally did it with the Switch. I can see that.
Yeah, I think that's a good point.
Yeah. You don't market towards kids when you're selling a remake of a game from the 90s. You don't market towards 10-year-olds then. You have to market towards 30.
So we're not going to see little kids playing the Final Fantasy VII remake.
Well, you will.
In the commercials.
Yeah, probably not.
Well, if they're smart, probably not.
If they're smart. They won't do that.
It's just funny to think back on how people thought that the Switch would be received before it came out. Like how much negativity there was surrounding it, how many people doubted that it was it was going to be a success.
Yeah,
I mean, I was one of those
Nintendo.
people. Not that I hate Nintendo. I've always loved Nintendo,
Right.
but I still
But in
thought,
general, yeah,
I still
online.
thought like this isn't really gonna do much. I didn't see it being a huge success, and it has just blasted away anyone's expectations. I think even Nintendo's own expectations.
25 to
Obviously,
30 million.
They've adjusted their
Holy crap!
So
That's insane.
Is that just because they've gotten much smarter in their marketing, or is that because of something else? Because as Reggie even points out in this quote, like they've been addressing things like the launch lineup issues and getting more third parties on board, and he's like, we've got that now.
Early, not waiting for the end of your console to have your Zelda game, or
so like,
which they did 2 times.
But yeah, like he's saying, you know, now we've got these independent developers, we've got third-party AAA developers, all that support's coming in now. But like that wasn't the case early on, and that's what a lot of people were looking at and saying that's part of the reason. Landon made a video that sort of analyzed launch lineups for past consoles. At least that was part of the video. Was like it didn't necessarily equal success to have a sort of a poor launch lineup. I don't remember. Do you remember, Landon, that research you did? Like, what was the key factor?
What was the coefficient?
There were so many different things in there, but I remember like the Wii U, I think, had the largest launch lineup of any console ever, and some other very successful consoles like the PlayStation 1. First PlayStation didn't really have much of anything that launched when it came out. But it's like,
when you think of Final Fantasy VII being a huge system seller for the PS1, that was 2 years after the PS1 had come out. The PS1 was introduced in '95, so it did take a while for that to catch on.
Yeah, I don't remember. I have to go watch that video again because I don't remember all that crap. I was thinking about doing a follow up on that because I just I talked to someone.
One thing I remember from it though was even the PlayStation 2's launch lineup was pretty like lackluster. There wasn't really anything there aside from like a mid-grade fighter and something else. I can't remember what it was.
Well, because
and that's the most successful console of all time.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that went out and bought a PlayStation 2 and then bought Final Fantasy 9 to play on their PlayStation 2.
Because that was what was up there. Yeah, that's right.
Well, it's like you buy this thing and you're
still
still
it can play DVDs. So at least those people who did that, maybe they still felt like they were getting use out of their PS2, even if they weren't playing many PS2 games at the time, because it could play movies, and the people watch movies on the PS2 all the time.
Well, here's what I'll do. I'll put a link to that video in the description for anyone who wants to go and take a look at it now, because that video came out before the launch of the Switch. I think it was supposed to kind of put into perspective, like just because it's lacking this or that doesn't mean it's going to be a failure necessarily, kind of a thing. That's not what the thesis was, but that was part of what the video was saying. So now that we're several months after the release and it's been a massive success, I think it'll be interesting to revisit that video and see if you could sort of lock down even a little bit more, like what is it that predicts success of a console.
This work?
And it definitely isn't launch lineup.
Yeah. I mean, launching in March is such a weird thing, though, and having such a limited supply at launch was just such a... You just can't make any conclusions based on that.
People were
there were only like 2 games at launch. So
that's true. It was supply constrained. Well, it's been supply constrained this whole time, especially in Japan. From what I hear, and our viewers in Europe will have to fill us in a little more, but I hear that it's not selling out in Europe the same way it's selling out in...
No, actually, I was just looking at the numbers. Because on VG Charts, I was looking at it, and it's like the top selling platform of... They kind of do weekly charts, right?
Yeah, I've seen like London.
PlayStation 4 is at the top, but the only reason why is because of European sales. In Europe, the PlayStation 4 is blowing up still. I mean, it's still selling like crazy. Over 100,000 units sold in Europe last week. Whereas in North America, it's only at 67,000, and in Japan, 23,000. Now, the Switch, by comparison, in North America, only 3,000 units behind, 64,000. It's almost double in Japan at almost 43,000. but it's only at 45,000 in Europe. Huge discrepancy there.
Yeah.
So for whatever reason, it's not resonating in the European market quite yet, or it could be supply.
Well, like the SNES was blown away in like the UK specifically by the Genesis. The Genesis.
So Europe's behind the times.
Well, oh geez, oh boy,
they need to get with it.
They were all in on Sega, right? They like that was. It was a Sega dominated market for sure. And then I guess Sony came in and just took the reins from Sega. I don't know.
That's funny.
Yeah, but it's interesting to remember because I wasn't a hater of the Switch. I really liked the Switch and I liked the idea of the Switch, but even I had a lot of doubts about whether it was going to have an impact in the industry at this stage. Yeah. Especially with the PlayStation 4 selling as well as it continues to sell. But it has. It really, really has, and that's been interesting. So I wanted to see what the viewers think about that in the comments, and then again, I'm going to put that video that Landon made in the description of the video. Go check that out, and let's see if we can figure out what's going on with that.
Well, I just had the thought that Nintendo's never had an unsuccessful handheld system, like ever, for 28 years now, whenever the Game Boy launched. Every handheld system they put out has been like really, like I think the least successful one would be the 3DS, and that was like 60 million units or something. So when you think of the Switch in terms of being handheld, at least in some way, Nintendo doesn't go wrong when it comes to
usually nail it.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, is that a lot of the industry analysts are saying nobody knew if the Switch would sell like a home console or like a handheld and follow because they tend to follow different trajectories.
Yeah,
and they're saying it's following the handheld trajectory, which is why these numbers are so high. Because what we're looking at here, 25-30 million next year, that's DS and Wii level.
Yeah,
in fact, exceeding it.
If they're 1 year, up to 30. Well, I guess that would be in 2 years total, right?
Like the best-selling year
that's
for
crazy.
Like the Wii, from what I was reading, did not exceed 30 million units. So, that's. But the thing with the Wii is it didn't have a great tail. Like the PS4 right now has an awesome tail. It's still it's selling really well. The Wii dropped off pretty heavily because it sold
way high at first and then dropped.
Yeah.
Very interesting. One other thing. Well, there's a couple other things. Nintendo just revised their profit estimates for this year from 500 million to 1 billion in profits, and that's just
dollars.
Dollars, I believe so. Yen, that wouldn't make sense. That wouldn't be very much, right? That'd be like 10 million. I believe it's dollars. I believe, but when you ask that, I can't confirm. I don't know for sure, but it was a big deal. Their profit margin's going to be like way bigger than it was, or than they thought it was going to be before. And the 500 million number was already a revised estimate from their other investor meeting from like April, which was probably lower, but I can't remember what it was.
Crazy.
Yeah, Nintendo's doing really well.
Good for them.
Yep.
It's kind of a thing that goes up and down. Business is up and it's down. It's up and it's down. You just kind of ride the waves.
Especially for Nintendo. The question is, what are they going to do with the next Switch? Because if the Wii U was called the Wii 2, would it have sold better? Nobody would have been wondering.
To be honest, maybe it would have.
That's what the PlayStation does every time.
Totally.
It's the number 2. It's the number 3. The number 4.
I mean, it was pretty different from the Wii, the way it was controlled and stuff. With PlayStation, they've stuck with the same controller for like 50 years. But, for Nintendo, it's like, oh, it's the Wii 2, but look at this gamepad. Like, that's not the Wii 2. But they wanted the Wii name. They just screwed it up. They screwed it up pretty bad. But the Switch 2, like, is that an option going forward? I don't know.
I never know what to expect from this company. I just doubt they'll ever do the same thing again.
They've never done that. Yeah, they don't play that game. They're going to do something freaking crazy for their next system. It won't sell. Then they'll be back against the wall. Then their one after that's going to go crazy, and that's been happening for them for a while now. The big question is, if the Switch is being seen as a handheld, is it going to encroach on the true handheld market for whatever Nintendo does in the future?
I've been hearing
if Nintendo does another DS type.
Yeah, I've heard that project is essentially canned at this point.
So
they were working on something.
Yeah,
as a contingency almost.
How successful can you really say the Switch is then? If you merged, because if we're gonna merge them, exactly. So if we're gonna say, okay, it's also the Wii U by 1 million units, or 1 billion units, but you got to combine the Wii U with the 3DS and then see if the Switch sold more than 75 million units, because that's effectively what they did. And so now the question of success is a little different.
I have two thoughts about that. One is that they can consolidate the software library now, so instead of having to support software releases for 2 platforms. It's on one platform, which makes that one platform
so that saves them money,
a stronger value proposition. But I also think that the profit margin on what they were getting on handheld sales versus home console sales, I don't know how that stacks up. You know what I mean?
Well, the 3DS was about 300 at launch, right?
And it came down pretty fast.
That's true. That cut into the margins.
It dropped within a couple months.
And I can't remember what the DS was and what that was relative to the GameCube. But I think they're relatively similarly priced, but I don't know what it costs to make either.
If the Wii U was being sold at a loss initially, which supposedly it was,
okay,
and the Switch is not being sold at a loss, their handhelds probably aren't loss leaders.
No, except that they did mark it down so soon. I mean, I do wonder.
Yeah, I don't know what their margins were losing. They might have started losing money.
But I got to say, when people were saying, "Oh, the Switch should have been 250, 300's too high," like. That was actually a genius move, because they're selling this much at that higher price point that people were thinking was too high. That means their profits are going to be
It's the most expensive handheld Nintendo's ever sold.
Yeah, so. I see that.
For sure.
No.
All right. Okay, so let's talk about this EA Reddit thing. So, okay, let's just go ahead and pull up the post. I'm going to put it on the screen here. This is the post. The post was by some Reddit user who said, seriously, I paid $80 to have Vader locked? I guess it was determined that Darth Vader you could only get through one of their like loot boxes or microtransactions.
Pretty much
didn't you have to
all the
get 40,000 crystals or whatever?
Or the alternative is that you could play the game forever and get it, or you could pay and get it unlocked sooner, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of the whole idea behind microtransactions these days. And loot boxes and stuff. But anyways, the response from the EA community team is the intent is to provide players with a sense of pride and accomplishment for unlocking different heroes. As for cost, we selected initial values based upon data from the open beta. I mean, this is just terrible PR BS speak. And other adjustments.
That they did it for a different reason than they actually did it.
Look at our data from the open beta and other adjustments made a milestone reward before launch. Among other things, we're looking at average per player credit earn rates on a daily. Like, who do they think they're speaking to right now? This is literally like what you would say to an investor. And they're trying to say this to a fan who's saying, seriously, I paid $80 to have Vader unlocked?
So they're purposefully speaking above him in that sense.
So it makes no sense to respond this way. We'll be making constant adjustments to ensure the player has challenges that are compelling, rewarding, and of course attainable via gameplay. We appreciate the candid feedback and the passion the community has put forth around the current topics here at Reddit, our forums, and across numerous social media outlets. It's just so formal. Our team will continue to make changes and monitor community feedback and update everyone as soon and as often as we can. That, as it stands right now, is 681,000 downvotes.
Did you downvote it? You got to be part of history.
Did you do it?
Hold on. I think I actually did. Let me log in again.
All right. Now everyone knows our position.
Yes,
but
I did. I downvoted
it. If you still want to send us all your games for free, feel free. We're just downvoting your post here. Don't mind it.
The top they've got there's actually a few of these that have like 25,000 upvotes.
Oh, a bunch of posers.
But people just being like, "No, we see the real reason why you're doing this," basically. So
Reddit.
The question I want to bring up over this is that it seems like, especially in recent, like this year in particular, the kickback from players has been really strong in response to microtransactions and loot boxes and paying extra for things that people feel should be in the game. It's been real strong this year. This is like kind of a boiling point for this, I feel.
Exactly, yeah.
So if that's the case, I mean, that's 681,000 people. That's over 500,000 people.
Yeah, I was surprised that many people even use Reddit.
Is bullcrap. And to put this in perspective, the first Star Wars Battlefront, not the first, but the first one made by and published by EA, so last 2015's version, right? Combined on the PS4 and Xbox One, sold about 12 million units, a little over 12 million units.
That's really good.
So it's really good. This is a significant portion of that number.
That's a good point.
More than 500,000 people, and that's just people who are using Reddit, who are Reddit savvy, and who are looking at news.
Who are aware, in the first place.
Who are looking for this stuff online, who go onto gaming websites, see an article, and then click through that article to come here to Reddit. And I mean, that number is probably way higher in terms of people who are very upset by this idea. When is that going to have an effect on scaling back what they're doing with this? At one point, do they look at that and go, yeah, we should probably not do this anymore?
I mean, it already has. They came out and said, oh, okay, we're decreasing the requirements to unlock these characters by 75%. So they've already addressed this somewhat.
They did. However, so now you only need 15,000 crystals to get Luke, which equates to about 12 hours of gameplay.
Instead of 40?
Instead of 40, yeah.
Because that was the craziest thing. Is like 40 hours of in-game time.
For one dude,
for one character. There's a ton of characters you could unlock. So that means you're like beelining it for like this guy. And then you played the game for 40 hours. You unlock your one dude. Cool. Okay, I want to unlock another guy.
And their statement is like, oh, don't you feel so good about yourself now? Having put so much work in to get Luke, is not Luke that much more valuable?
And
now?
Like
I don't know.
There is an element of psychology that games employ like that. People get pissed about
but that's too far.
But that's definitely too far.
No, that's at that point you're like, okay, I got Luke. Like, what did I just do with my life?
However, this is an online multiplayer game. People sink crazy amounts of time into these.
You know, when we played Call of Duty, hundreds of hours.
A lot of time. But to me, this is telling a person who is like, I saw other people on Reddit who are like, hey, I'm a father. I come home from work. I have most evenings I don't have time to play a game. Right. So they're like, I can get in maybe 10 hours a month. So you're telling me I can play a game for 4 months
and get one
to unlock like this one dude.
Yeah.
It's kind of weird. And then other people are saying, well, what if you unlock that guy and it turns out to be kind of crappy and you don't like him? What if Vader actually sucks?
Well, and then say you're a kid, though. Say you're a kid online and you don't have that extra money to put into a microtransaction, but like the dudes who are online who are paying, they get an advantage because they've unlocked all these extra characters. It just especially in a competitive online game, it creates a real bad balance between.
I think that's what EA is looking for, though, because the kids have the time to put into it. The adults don't have the time to put into it, but the adults have the money to put into it, and so they feel like they've hit a sweet spot, and it's freaking bullcrap.
Yeah. I think these kinds of things should stick in the realm of like cosmetic changes.
Yeah,
like what Overwatch does, where it's like this dude has all kinds of crazy skins and stuff. But so you know he plays a lot.
Doesn't affect gameplay.
Or spend a lot of money, but it's not making them better at the game. Yeah. It's not giving them an advantage necessarily. That's definitely not cool.
And it's I just find it. I don't know. I'm just curious to see. I mean, it's good to. I didn't know that they had already come out and immediately said we're going to change the requirement.
Yeah, they lowered everything, which is fine. But it's an image thing. Like, hey, great, it is what it is, but people's opinion of companies matter, and even just the fact that they tried this is EA. It's going to be hard for them.
Just a couple of years ago, they won the crappiest company in the world award, or whatever that this is even called.
And now they're doing this.
So well, I mean, like, to my understanding, they're a profitable company.
I think they're more profitable.
You know that shot in Zombieland, where Woody Harrelson's dabbing his tears with the those $100 bills.
I don't remember that,
Anyways.
but that sounds, you know.
That's like EA to me. They're like, I'm sorry, guys. And to some extent, there's the enthusiast community that is the most likely community to get upset by this. To be honest, I'm not sure that, okay, this game sold so much because the first one sold so much because Star Wars.
Because Star Wars. And
also,
that was
the first one was coming out.
Movie was coming out.
Yeah, exactly. It was lined up with the big movie releases. This one's lined up with the next big movie release. And so many people on Black Friday are going to be at Target, grabbing crap for their kid.
Get that
Star Wars game. My kid loves Star Wars. They bought the game, you know. So it's like you got 600,000.
What percentage of that 12 million equals moms at Target on Black Friday? Yeah.
Right, and the other thing is, I guarantee you this, that in 2 months ish, maybe 3 months, you're gonna see posts on the gaming subreddit and the game subreddit that will be top posts, maybe not the gaming subreddit, the game subreddit, that will be like somebody doing an awesome kill.
Yeah, some footage from the game.
You know, people tend to have like short, like, I don't know. They like,
internet activism is like,
well, okay,
has a lifespan of hours.
Not only internet activism, but for example, if the next Elder Scrolls game was about to be released and it had loot crates and all kinds of crap you hate, had a gotcha system, but fetch, I've waited like half a decade or longer for this, more than whenever it does come out. Say you waited like 10 years for this game, are you gonna not buy the game? That's the problem. Right. Some of these games, the developer knows that like they can push pretty hard, because to get somebody out of their buyer pool is gonna take like a lot, because this is like, where else are you gonna go? You know what I mean? If you want to play the next Skyrim or whatever. And that's just a theoretical example, but I think companies like EA actually understand that to some degree. Like, we can push people pretty far, and it's freaking Star Wars. If you want to play a Star Wars video game these days, you have to play an EA game.
It's true, yeah.
They have the whole shebang right now.
And they're good with that. They have FIFA, they have Madden, they have monopolies on that. Like, no one else can have access to those teams and players.
It's like their business. Yeah, if you want to play an NFL,
if you want to play, you have to play EA. You can't.
So it's like, I feel like that's part of their business model. To be honest, it's too bad.
Where else would you go? And they're like clanking their claws, twisting their mustaches.
I keep waiting to see when
clipping their cigars.
This splash will get big enough to have a true kickback into the wallets of the developers, because I was already sold to buy NBA 2K18 on the Switch this year, and then I saw what it was doing with microtransactions, with like not being able to customize your
stuff,
and having to pay to upgrade stats. Like, I saw that, and it's such an easy decision. Nope, I have a million other things I could do. I'm definitely not buying that game. But I'm here on VG charts, looking at the weekly software charts, and what's still at the top? NBA 2K18, both the PS4 and Xbox One versions. 674,000 units on the PS4, 402,000 units on the Xbox One. Over 1 million units between the two sold just this last week of NBA 2K18.
In 1 week. Oh, shoot. Well,
dang, 1 week, freak.
Now, this was back in September, actually. Okay,
that was when it first came out.
This is updated. So
I know
that's
that
probably around the
like
time it was released. But
the share of the game that was sold on the Switch was like 2% or something. It was really, really low. And I think, I can't remember what article I was reading at the time, but they were saying, well, it doesn't look like EA is going to be making another game on the Switch anytime
soon. Well, that's 2K.
Oh, yeah, 2K.
Oh, sorry. Then I was referring to FIFA.
Oh, okay.
I was referring to FIFA, not 2K18. The FIFA 18 sold like 2%.
Now, wasn't that one also essentially a downgraded version anyways?
Yeah,
in a different
it was running on a whole different engine. Yeah.
So it wasn't even really the same game necessarily, but
no, it looked similar, but it
close
wasn't.
enough. It's soccer.
Yeah, but 2K18 essentially was, right?
So yeah, but I sit here. I guess since this is a September figure, that's a while back. This is probably around the week it was released, so that I guess it's expected that it would. So I wonder if it long term, the tail of it, saw an effect of the bad press that it was getting surrounding this, and whether that's going to adjust how they approach the next NBA 2K at all. I see it boiling higher and higher all the time, but I see the developers pushing it farther and farther every game, and I'm not sure what's going to happen. I mean, and they, you know, we've even talked about this on the podcast about rising costs of development and inflation and stuff. But but Horizon Zero Dawn still did just fine. Breath of the Wild still did just fine. Like, there's so many games that are able to do it and have huge success selling a $60 game just fine without putting microtransactions and loot boxes and all these cheap ways to get more money out of you into the game. They still have season passes and DLC down the line, but it's months apart. It's not like the next day. So I don't feel bad for them. I don't feel sorry for them. I think that there's a lot of greed that is pushing this, and it's not just the fact that, our costs have gone up.
Yeah.
I don't think that's
the greed essentially was pushing games to be better, but we've come to this weird point where companies wanting to make money, there are other ways to do it other than making your game better. And that's probably the most frustrating thing.
Yeah.
There's a mechanism for exploitation and gambling, which we're going to talk about soon, that is being used to fuel the profits for these companies now.
Yeah.
That didn't used to be the case.
Yeah, for sure. Like, the entire idea, I think, of episodic content. I know that this is probably a controversial opinion, but I think that if that's stated from the beginning, like, this is what we're doing with this, and it's established from the start, and you release your game in more pieces, but you're making revenue throughout the development process, that makes a lot more sense to me, to like get returns and like to be able to continue development for long periods and keep people, you know, these huge teams, like to keep them employed, keep the costs, you know, be able to pay for the development process essentially. That makes more sense to me than trying to tack on all of this bullcrap at the end of the process and like, let's squeeze as much as we can get back.
Yeah. And
so
it's
that's
targeted
just one
towards
answer.
Such a small percentage of the population. Like the number of people who they're going for with these microtransactions who are actually going to bite and are going to spend and make it, you know, give them a reasonable amount of money. What they call them whales, and what is it, like 1%?
It's like the real whales, the ones that are like spending upwards of
like
$1,000, they're like 0.1%.
But they're so important.
But they're spending 50%.
They're spending 50. They're accounting for 50% of the post-game purchase sales.
You know what?
And it's 0.1% of the population.
That's
what they're going for. But in order to get that 0.1%, you have to screw the experience for all 100% of everyone.
That's so interesting because to me, if that's like the ultimate goal, right, is just to get those people to splurge big money.
I think it is.
Then they almost don't care about upsetting all the other
everyone
people
else.
Because it's like, it's okay, you're just giving me the $60 upfront cost. This guy's going to pay $3,000 to play the game, and that's the guy I'm after.
Will, yeah.
Well, so the one factor that could influence that is that if you read interviews with people that are self-confessed whales in mobile games and stuff like that, they usually say that they're further incentivized to invest more money in a game with a large population. So like the game is selling
Battlefront 2 will probably be that,
which this will then they feel better about it putting that money into the game because you know they're going to be a big fish in a bigger pond. You know what I mean? So if I'm going to spend $500, and I seriously wonder if half these people like come home from freaking working on Wall Street, you know, they're like stockbrokers who are freaking high stressed, you know, like totally losing it, like fetch man, I just get in this Star Wars game and buy Darth Vader right now. Buy Skywalker right now.
Who gives a fetch? Yeah,
I don't know.
Wall Street dads got to get that Darth Vader day one, dude. So they can go around force choking people and get all that rage from trading the stocks.
So pissed.
It's trickle down economics. You've got the rich people pay for the game for everybody else to play so that they can buy it at a lower price. That's what should happen, at least. That's not what actually happens. You still pay the normal price for a normal game, but the rich people subsidize everything else.
So I don't remember when this happened exactly, but when EA bought the exclusive rights to the Star Wars franchise, what did they pay for that?
Good question.
And are they still trying to like?
I thought it was just a partnership with Disney. I didn't know that there was an outright purchasing.
But,
so in that sense, I think they've
got exclusivity.
Yeah,
don't they?
Yeah.
The only exception to that, well, as a publisher, I think, because Titanfall's Respawn, right? They supposedly are making a Star Wars game, but that's still that's EA's their
Star Wars Titanfall.
Star Wars, which could be pretty cool.
Starfall Wars Titan.
Yeah,
that's interesting. Yeah, I don't know what the details are with their deal there.
Yeah, I would have assumed it was more of a partnership than like a.
But like the mobile Star Wars games, it's like EA
outright.
Those are too.
There are no other Star Wars games like at all.
Yeah, but I wonder like if it was like EA went to Disney and said, we want the license to produce all the games. Let's buy that. Or if it was like Disney came to EA and said, we need Star Wars games. Let's partner. And like you buy a percentage of something like that. Because Disney closed down all their own game development.
Yeah.
They did.
That's true.
So they have no mechanism themselves to produce Star Wars games. So who do they go to do that for them? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I wonder.
Yeah, if it's the latter, then I would imagine that Disney has a huge stake in the sales of the game.
I think
if they didn't pay up front for the rights, because I also just read recently that EA's rights supposedly are timed to 2022 or something like that.
Really?
There's some time.
That's not going to happen. That'll get extended.
It will get extended,
probably.
Basically, ever since just the first Battlefront, it's like, okay, Disney's all in with EA.
So I've been under the impression that they have some kind of agreement that has a termination date at some point, at which point I guess. So whether they've paid up front or whether that's just a revenue share with Disney. But it makes you wonder in games like this, is Disney approaching EA saying, here are our profitability targets. Here's what we need to be hitting. And EA's saying, okay, well, here's one way you could do that, right? Like, I feel like there's a lot of different ways behind the scenes.
You know what? And in that sense, Disney would shoulder quite a bit of the responsibility for lighting the fire under EA to become super profitable on this stuff.
Either that or EA suits sit in a meeting somewhere with Disney suits and they say, here's this genius way you make an ace load of money.
And Disney is all ears. Good. You know what I'm saying?
Get it?
They're all ears when it comes to that kind of stuff.
Get it?
Yeah, Mickey Mouse ears. Get it? If I had a hat, I'd put it on right now. We should make a video about how Disney's all ears. Like crap.
Oh, man.
Once again, EA, if you want to send us your games, do it. Feel free.
If you don't want
We're just making fun of you a little bit here.
I'm not going to play Star Wars, but...
I probably wouldn't play it anyway.
No, I wasn't going to anyway. I didn't play
I still gotta get Mario Odyssey, man. So whatever.
Yeah.
That's a good game.
Oh, I've heard.
Okay. That'll probably be a Thanksgiving weekend or week thing. Let's get into the questions from the viewers here. Anders Bod Mai, how do you feel about games breaking the fourth wall? I just completed a game, can't tell you without spoiling it, where the big reveal at the end was that the whole thing was a game. So basically nothing in the world mattered because it was just a game. But I'm also thinking about smaller examples, like when an NPC is telling you to press X to jump. I've always hated that stuff. All right. What's a good example of a game that just like tells you outright
like that
Ocarina of
blatantly?
Time.
I know the practice.
Well, use Z to targeting tool again.
Well, yeah. So that example at the end, I'm wondering about if I can think of any examples of what he's talking about at the beginning, where the game just comes out like the whole game. You think you're playing like a story, and then it's like, nope, you're just playing a game. And it just like completely like shatters its own universe. And
I could bring one up, but then now because this guy mentioned spoilers,
didn't say it.
So I don't know if I should say mine now.
There is that one game where you find out you're in a simulation.
I know I think I know what you're talking about. Is that a PS2 game? Is that a PS2 game you're thinking of?
Right. Yeah.
Okay. I haven't actually played that, but I've heard about it, yeah. Maybe that's the one he's talking about.
Maybe it is.
Maybe
it is. I always felt Assassin's Creed...
That was similar.
Now, you still play, like, outside the Animus, but, like... It felt kind of cheap to me a little bit. It was like too easy. It was like, oh, you can't go over here. There's a plot wall there, but no, it's because your
memory. Yeah, you don't remember what that's like right now. We haven't accessed
the guy didn't actually go there. The memory does not access that portion.
But he does later. But we're not doing that now.
Oh man.
Yeah. So it's a tough line to walk, right? Like it has its time and place depending on tone, depending on setup. If you set something up, and in the game that we're briefly referencing there, you pay it off with an absolute freak twist like that comes out of left field, you run some risk of one either being like, whoa, never saw that coming, awesome, or people go like, that's bullcrap, what?
Yeah.
So
when you get meta, at least to the point where it's like, oh, you were just, like the word just, you were just playing a game, none of this actually made a difference, that has got to like throw the game player into at least like a small depression, just like a little tiny amount of like, oh, what I just did was just play a game, and I didn't actually accomplish anything, right? And the game is telling you this. And that may even be a subconscious thing, but it's kind of like, okay, put the controller down and just think about your life for an hour, I guess. Like, that's just not fun. That's not what I don't know, that's not what anybody wants, I guess.
Yeah, you know, there's another, like, I guess for a comic or film example, you know, with Deadpool, who's constantly talking to the audience all the time. You have a tone that's set throughout the entire thing. I mean, the guy from the beginning is doing this, and it's all kind of a joke, and they're not. It's real lighthearted. It's not taking itself too seriously.
Right.
When you take that route, I think it's a little easier to pull that off for sure. So, like, whether or not it's a good or a bad thing, I think is just, again, and this is kind of a cop-out answer for the most part. You can answer this to anything really, but it just depends on what you're going for. What's the tone of the game? What's the purpose? What's the
when it comes to what he's saying about the press X to jump thing, though, I'm thinking about it. I've played there's like 3 different approaches to this, I guess. You can just forego controls altogether and people just figure it out on their own, I guess, which would be the original Super NES. You just kind of did it like Mario. You learn
have like the manual,
what the buttons do. Yeah, I guess the manual made up for that probably to a large degree, but the game doesn't tell you anything. The game doesn't break the fourth wall in that sense. But then you have games like Ocarina of Time, where, you know, people are telling you what to do. But then you also have games where they just show you, like at the beginning of the game, right when you hit start, they show you the controller. They give you a map of what all the buttons do. They're like, here, R, jump, B, and this, and they have like their whole diagram, right? And then they just kind of throw you into it. And that, I've always found that difficult, because I look at that and I'm just like, I'm not going to remember any of this, right? When it comes down to it, I look for the ones I want, like which one select, which one, you know, is shield, depending on what game I'm playing, what's attack. All right, we're going to just go with that for now. And so like in that sense, at least for me personally, it's very difficult to get around the press X to jump, like, part of an intricate game, of a complicated game.
Yes.
Controls that have any degree of complexity. And I don't like it, but I don't immediately see a way around it, other than to just let people figure it out.
Doesn't Limbo, like when you walk up to a thing, the button will appear over your head or something like that?
I've seen that too. That may be
like
a fourth
contextual,
but that's
sort of
breaking the fourth wall. Oh,
it
that's
kind of
almost
is
the same thing as press
in a subtler way.
There.
Yeah, it's not. It's non-diegetic or whatever. Yeah. So I mean, I think the key that you hit on there, which was also what I was going to bring up, is complexity. The reason Mario gets away with it is because Mario is incredibly simple. It's an incredibly simple game. You don't have to think that hard to figure it out. You don't have to experiment really. And more of where it's like layers of gameplay come in are in power-ups, and you sort of just gain those. Each world kind of introduces a new one, generally speaking, and you learn them over the course of carefully designed levels. So it works for Mario. You don't have to have a tutorial teaching you how to play the game. But when you get into something really complex, like a extremely comprehensive layered combat system in an RPG, you can't just let people try and figure that out on their own. You got to have some level of teaching them. Now, like you said, there are a number of ways to do that. One is throw it all at them at once at the beginning, outside of the story, and have them look it over and try and remember it. That's overwhelming. People are going to forget stuff. The other way is to have, you know, not the best sort of like fitting dialogue of a character that breaks the fourth wall all of a sudden and tells you what to do on the controller. Another way you could do it, I think, and I don't know to what success this has on a large scale, is to have the tutorial be a entirely separate menu option. Either in the middle of the game you can press pause and go to a tutorial menu and pull up like it like loads like a different screen or a different world and sort of just like teaches you the controls. Sometimes they'll do that as a start menu option. So when you boot up the game, you have like continue or start game, and then they'll have like another section for tutorial, and you go in there and it loads up like a simulation area, and you kind of like figure out the controls. I see the merits in that you don't have to have a character say press X to jump, and you can kind of just keep the writing and everything congruent and fluid with the storytelling, if it's a story heavy game anyways. I don't think that telling Mario press X to jump in something like Mario plus Rabbids is a problem, but it would be for something like, I don't know, like some open world adventure game like The Witcher 3 or something like that. It's like, what the freak are you saying? But I don't think there's a perfect solution, because then you might have people that miss it, like, oh, I don't know how to do this, and they're fighting a boss and they're getting frustrated, and they don't realize on the start menu there was a tutorial. That happened to me. Remember when we played Baldur's Gate 2 way back at the beginning of the channel? And I was like, they never taught me how to play the game. What's going on? I'm freaking dying. What's happening? There was a tutorial option on the start menu of the game. And everyone's like, oh, you didn't do the tutorial. And it's like, I didn't even see that dang tutorial. So, you know, that you run the risk of doing that. But I would still prefer that in a very story-heavy game over having the characters tell you what the controls are. In a fourth breaking wall. I think way.
I brought this up last time, but like the Persona games, I think handle this pretty well. It's just a overlay, just freeze the action, overlay,
pause the game, think,
just pause the game. Like, I was blown away. Like in Persona 4, I swear I was like 50 or 60 hours into the game, which it took me like, I don't know, like 110, 120 hours to beat the game. So like halfway through the game. But still, 60 hours in the game, and I got like a prompt to teach me how to do something new. I was like, "What the fetch? Holy crap! That's crazy." Yeah, I think it helps if a game's designed, if they're going to do that, if they have that in mind, and that stuff is spaced out so that like you got enough spaced repetition in, so to speak. You know, like they taught you a thing,
and you got good,
allowed you to implement it. They gave you a few ways to iterate, and then they taught you a new thing instead of being like, "Here's 5 new things." And then try to iterate. But yeah, I like the overlay thing just for me personally, because it's like, hey, yeah, it's just me, the guy playing the game.
Right.
Just like, the whole world.
Hold on. Let's pause for a second.
Yeah, you already have that in terms of like menus or like RPG battle system, the menus and your what do they call it? Overlay, your HUD. And just your life meter and your press A or your controls in the corner. That's already there. So having it be like that, I much prefer to a character in-game dialogue saying,
rather than Cloud explaining to Barrett about like how to go to the equipment menu and
it's like press select this. Yeah. However, there's some games where they do that, and I love it. Like
Animal Crossing.
No. Well, I mean, yeah, I guess I'm the rest of it, but
they break the fourth wall all the time.
The Mario and Luigi games, like and Mario RPG kind of does this too. But like Bowser's Inside Story, like when you learn how to do a new like special move that you have to practice a bunch of times over, like I think in that game, it's a little spark dude comes up and he's like, pause the battle. And he's like, okay, go over here and do it. But it's kind of funny. I don't know why. It's just kind of like they make it a little jokey and stuff. And it fits the mood of that game. But those are games that aren't trying to be serious. I mean, Bowser grows to be the size of a giant, you have like mech battles with Bowser and like these mechanical fighting castles. It's just an insane game, so it fits the tone. Really.
In a non-serious game, you kind of get away with doing whatever you want.
You can. I think that's part of Nintendo tends to do things that way.
They do, yeah.
Or not like
they don't want to be too real.
Well, yeah, and I think that it allows them some flexibility. We were talking about this last time. Like the art direction can allow you more flexibility to get away with stuff.
Totally, yeah. Just having a game look less real, your expectations are tempered. Fast travel's fine. Breaking the fourth wall is fine, all that stuff.
Yep.
Still prefer it not to be
the more abstractions you can get away with, the more tutorials you can get away with.
Exactly. Exactly.
Okay. Good question, Anders Bodmai. Appreciate it.
Very much so.
Next one comes from Zels Klemvers. Do you consider gambling to be a type of gaming? He has a lot more context to this on on Patreon.
Patronus.
See, I'm not going to read the whole thing. Just sum it up. He talks about poker. He thinks poker is a really great game because it requires skill. Being able to influence outcomes by essentially, wearing the poker face, like convincing people you have something you don't have, that sort of thing.
The meta game. That's
the meta game, right? So then he also goes into talking about gambling machines, and in Japan they're now allowing Western-style casinos into the country. It talks about pachinko, had a connection to that with North Korea, and then online currency and microtransactions and loot boxes, like mirroring some of those things. So overall, considering all that stuff, like, what are our thoughts on gambling being a type of game?
Yeah. I remember once we had a question of, like, what is a game? Like, what does it take to make a game? And I think I had come to the conclusion that gamification, even if it's the smallest, like, minor element, if there's one element of gamification in almost anything, basically that whole thing can be considered a game. Because even if it's just like a small little piece that's like, oh, this, I can't even think of it.
I remember that conversation.
It was a year ago. Yeah.
Did we come to the conclusion that choose your own adventure books are a game?
No, I don't remember.
I mean, is that gamification? Is giving a player choice? Is that
selecting one or the other? Does that make it a game?
It's like playing the Walking Dead games, right? There is a reward, like
the reward is
die, or you did. Or you
oh, true. You could die in those games. I remember choose your own adventure. Sometimes you go and it's like one sentence, and it's like you chose wrong, you died. Like go back. But okay, so anyways, given that definition, even the smallest amount of gaming being injected into something makes it a game essentially, right? And so when it comes to gambling, I mean, it's minimal. The gaming elements that I see, at least as far as pachinko, slot, gotcha system things, and I see that as like just the most as minimal an amount of gaming as you could possibly put into something and still call it like. And I don't know. It's just the minimum amount, but that makes it a game.
It needs rules, right?
So right. Like, the rules are you get points if the ball goes. You don't have any control over the ball, but you push a button and you get points if it does a certain thing. And that's a reward system. Not to mention you get money. It's gambling, right? So there's a reward system there. But it's yeah, I would have to call it gambling, but I do that very hesitantly.
Gambling game.
Gambling game. That's what
yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat. It's like with blackjack or poker or something like
games, that. Yeah,
those are very clearly games to me.
But even then, it's basically just a random.
But I mean, the same thing applies to Magic the Gathering. If you think about it, like that's still
true.
considered
that's a good
a game.
Point.
Like but you build a deck.
Yeah.
You build a deck and you know what's in the deck, but you still have to draw. So there's still luck involved in the game, but it's being able to take what you get and strategically think about what to do.
Yeah.
Now, Magic requires probably more strategy in that sense than something like poker, but poker strategy is different. It's more about mind games than it is about like employing like cards creatively or something like that, right? So I would say very clearly to me, card games in gambling are definitely games. Slot machines, that's pushing it for me, where it's just like I press a button and wait to get money or lose money. But that's real hard for me to define as a game.
When you talk about slot machines, if you are doing the act of slotting, what do you call that? I don't think that's a good sentence, so I'll just answer it right now. You call it playing. You play the slot machine. You play poker. You play pachinko. The word play is put into those.
I don't know,
because at the most minuscule level, it's
something deep in my heart tells me that I just can't I can't consider pulling a slot as a game. It's
and you watch people doing it, you're just like, these are the most glazed over, just like robotic people that you
no thought applied to that whatsoever.
And then something happens and you're excited, but it's like, my gosh.
Yeah. I struggle to call that a game, but that's just my own personal opinion.
One thing that I mentioned in my Yakuza video, actually, I don't know, for those of you who aren't aware, I have a video series on the YouTube channel that is called Dark History, and on one of the episodes I go through the Yakuza, the Japanese mafia, and their connection to the video game industry. And I actually talk about this quite a bit. I talk about pachinko and how people in Japan call their activities gaming, not gambling. Nobody says
to get around gambling. Laws. Mm-hmm.
They always say that they're gaming when they go to play pachinko. Now, you mentioned this at the beginning, Mike, and in the comments, Zels talks about how gambling in Japan is different from gambling in America, at least for the time being, but that Japan is about to introduce more what we would consider
legit gambling.
Traditional gambling systems. Yeah, and that's going to become legal, and they're going to allow that. But at the moment, most gambling comes in the form of things like pachinko. And there's a little more game in that than slot machines, I think. But even still, people in Japan call their activity gaming. They don't call it gambling. They don't refer to it that way.
Yeah, because gambling's technically
gambling
illegal.
Is essentially technically illegal. Yeah.
So because of that, they use that as a loophole to get around the whole gambling thing.
And then prize exchange, and the Yakuza is still sort of involved in that, I guess. But he talks about North Korea too, and it's true. A lot of pachinko owners do come from North Korea, but I can't remember exactly why that was maybe relevant to.
Okay, so he said
whether or not it's gaming.
Possibly in Landon's old stomping grounds in Wakayama or Wakayama. How the freak do you say that?
Wakayama. And I didn't know there was a resort going up there. Is it in Wakayama City? I'll have to look this up. Or Wakayama Prefecture.
I thought it was in Tokyo, but
because Wakayama
recently, gambling on horse races, boat races, and bike races has been encouraged a lot more than pachinko. My personal impression based on number of ads, which I think somewhat demonstrates a renewed focus on U.S. relations in addition to tourism-based economy stuff. So the reason that they're wanting to legalize this,
the Olympics, and
they want tourists to gamble when they come to Japan.
Yep, and they're going to have all these casinos ready to go by the 2020 Olympics.
Okay, not sure if Kason Landon has looked into the Pachinko-North Korean connection much, but it seems that a majority of Pachinko parlors were run by Koreans displaced by war, many of whom sent Pachinko business earnings back to North Korea through Singapore and China.
And still do.
People are sometimes arrested for doing that, but police don't crack down on Pachinko parlors themselves, despite exploiting the same type of loophole. And then online currency and microtransactions loot boxes might be considered the same boat. Using a third party to skirt normal laws regarding financial transactions or gambling. That's been a topic on YouTube
agree
a lot.
With that. I consider that gambling.
Because there was a whole freaking debacle with a couple YouTubers who their target their audience was like 16-year-old kids and younger, and they were basically like they had set up. They didn't disclose this at all in the video. They were pretending as if they were using the loot system or whatever, and they were winning all this real money, and they were like, "Oh wow, what I won!" And they were acting all excited, but they did not disclose that they were literally the owners of this business, and they could skew or like change the percentages so that they could let themselves win for the video. But their audience, for the most part, freaking like 14 to 16-year-old kids, and like that's whether or not that's like basically selling gambling to kids, you know, like there was a whole thing about that. So yeah. Let's see. I think Bitcoin fought pretty hard to avoid being considered a true currency for similar reasons. Not too sure about that, but anyways.
I know a lot of governments handle Bitcoin differently. Like China is just trying to delegitimize Bitcoin.
They are.
Yeah, but okay. Funny thing about the loot box stuff and the microtransaction thing is China actually has stricter laws regarding this stuff than most other parts of the world.
That's true, except in Macau. You are allowed to go to Macau and you're allowed to gamble.
And I'm not talking about like the traditional gambling so much as like in a game, if there's a thing that can be earned,
I see.
It has to be. You have to have an option that you can purchase it outright. Like,
interesting.
To my understanding, so if there's a thing that you can only get by getting a bunch of loot boxes and getting enough parts to craft that thing.
You can't. It can't be an option to just buy loot boxes over and over again. You have to also have the option to buy the thing itself.
All of your money doing that.
Yeah, you have to be able to buy. So which is not required in the U.S.
Interesting.
Like I don't think Japan requires that, or pretty much anywhere else. Because I think parts of China have had issues. I think these gaming mechanics have been in some games. Maybe not longer, but they found some more widespread success over there, and I think the government was very worried about it, so they kind of created these laws to kind of clamp down on that. But I think the U.S. could do with some similar laws. But I mean, to get our government to pass laws
is really hard.
About anything is hard. So yeah, specifically about what people are doing in these video games. I feel like it's pretty low on the priority.
Yeah, please. Like, I don't like what games are doing, but like, I don't want my government to come in and start dictating to these video game companies what to do. That'll just make it a lot worse.
Oh, like you don't want them to do what China's doing?
No, not really.
Okay.
I mean, it would be fine. That single law would be fine, but I don't think getting the government involved in the video game industry,
to me, it's similar to like what South Korea does, where it's like if you're a minor, your internet shuts off
at 10 p.m.
Yeah, 10 p.m. Things that are like they can sell it as something for the greater good, and you could argue that would be for the greater good in the U.S., but good luck freaking getting that ever to be a law in the United States. Just people would not go for that.
Well, and then it's kind of funny because as far as what the games are being used for, essentially, like if they shut off the access of a minor to the internet where they're playing RuneScape online, right? But that minor still has homework to do that maybe they're staying up past 10 p.m. You can't just turn off their internet or whatever. I don't know.
I don't know if
I don't know exactly. I know that their Norebang, or no, that's karaoke. Sorry, their PC Bang. The
cafes.
Yeah, I can't remember what they're called in Japanese.
Internet cafes.
Just internet cafes. They are you have a little card with a little ID number, and you walk in, and then they kick you out at 10 p.m. and they're like, you have to leave. Like it's illegal to keep minors there after 10 p.m. Because I think some kids died playing games for like 40 hours straight.
Well, yeah, China and a lot of East Asian places. Yeah, they've had problems with 24-hour gaming binges.
Yeah.
And people, you sit down for too long, your legs don't circulate properly. If you already have circulation issues, you can get blood clots. Like that guy who died watching Return of the King. Which I don't want to laugh about, but it was like
I didn't hear about
you were in poor health if you died watching Return of the King.
Right. I mean, a 3-hour movie is a lot, but
because he didn't stand up and
yeah. Ooh, jeez.
Anyways, that's a whole tangent, I guess.
Well, to be
did we answer that question?
I don't know. It's like a multi-parter.
We do think some types of gambling are gaming.
Yeah, I would say all, but that's just. I'd reluctantly say all. But
Cason's Twitter will say #all, and Mike's Twitter will say #not all.
#not all games.
Not all gambling's gaming. Okay. Quip 1408. How much does originality count for a game being good, especially looking back on the old ones. For instance, I think Super Mario Brothers is better than Super Mario Brothers 3. Get ready to fight me. Because
Super Mario Brothers 3 is the best one in the series, man.
Just joking, by the way. Because it was more impressive when I first played it. It was something new. But I think Super Mario World was the best of all Mario games because of its changes and innovations. Didn't feel that with 3, even knowing it's a better game than the first one. I feel the same way about BioShock 1 and Infinite, but the opposite way about Resident Evil 1 and 3. Thoughts?
I never actually played Resident Evil 3.
I actually feel like, for the most part, 3 is considered worse than 1. So that's kind of a he's
breaking the mold with all his pains.
Well, there is something to be said about when something is new and it's like you've never seen something like that before, or even if you've seen something similar but not really combined in the way they did it like that before. That's probably more accurate because I don't know what absolute true originality you really see in things that often. But yeah, I mean, there's something to be said about, you get something that's fresh, something that you hadn't really seen before, and then they make a sequel to that thing, and it's like I feel like I've played that. I feel like I've played that already, even though there were some differences about it. And let's say it's still really good. It's not quite the same as being blown off your feet like you were the first time you experienced that new thing. So, your point about Mario Brothers 1 and 3, but then you go on to say that, World for you was way better because it had enough changes or innovations to it to where it felt new to you again.
Right, so the threshold of what's enough. So I guess Yoshi was the thing that
Yoshi just tipped it right over the
If it weren't for Yoshi, honestly, that game's not that different from Mario 3.
Actually, okay, here's the biggest difference between Mario World and Mario Bros. 3. Mario Bros. 3, how many power-ups does that game have?
Oh, like you have the frog
mushroom,
suit. You got the
mushroom fireball, Tanuki, frog suit.
Can be in the boot.
Turn into the stone guy.
Yeah,
the stone. That's right.
There's a ton of power-ups in Super Mario Bros. 3. There's a lot. Super Mario World, you have mushroom to get big. You have fire flower, and you have the feather that turns into the cape. Other than that, there's Yoshi.
And Yoshi has some of those powers that you mentioned. Like
if he eats a
yellow shell or
but Super Mario World actually has less power-ups by dramatically less power-ups than Super Mario Bros. 3.
That's interesting.
Which I've always found to be really interesting because if you follow the trajectory that the Mario Brothers series appeared to be on with Mario Brothers 3, it's like what do you think they would add to Mario Brothers 4? Because the first Super Mario Brothers had fire flower and the mushroom.
Right.
Mario Brothers 3 had like I don't know. A ton, like
10
power-ups. A lot of power-ups. Then in the fourth one, are they going to have like 18 or like 20 power-ups, or like what do they do to make this better, right? And like Super Mario World, I think was just this genius reining in and refining of concepts. It was a bit of a less is more. I feel like kind of approach,
which was right.
That's a whole nother.
Well, and additionally to that, they pulled back the power-ups, but they gave Mario more abilities than just to jump. He can spin.
Because they have more buttons.
Yeah, that was a big deal. Yeah, that's right, the X and Y.
Yeah. You could do that on the NES.
So you could spin on top of things and hop on them. So that added a whole new dimension to platforming that wasn't there before at all.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, the thing that's so tough about originality as a concept is that originality is literally different for each person depending on their experience. So
that's true. That's true. Top Gun.
A kid
is
born
the most original movie to someone not from America.
a kid born. Let me think of a game. Okay, so I'm playing through I Am Sensitive right now. I'm very close to finishing it. As I've gone through the game more and more and more, the story feels just more and more and more generic. It's just like, this is the most predictable thing I've ever played. I turned that over to a kid who's never played an RPG before, not going to feel the same way.
It's possible that
a new experience.
Favorite RPG ever, and that they would like Chrono Trigger less.
Yeah, and that's not. I mean, it starts as a joke, but that's actually legitimately true. That could actually happen.
Yeah.
And so it whether something's original really, honestly, is in the eyes of beholder, because when I'm 80 years old still playing video games, I doubt very much I'll be surprised by much at that point. Like, I will have likely seen it all at that point in my life. So am I just going to be like, everything that comes out, no, that's not original, that's not original? I mean, the tendency is, yes, I probably have some sense of just not being surprised by games anymore.
Right.
But is that because, I mean, and you admitted that you think Mario 3 is better than 1. So, like, you have the objectivity to do that, but it obviously is still affecting your ability to enjoy something if it doesn't feel like it has that freshness or sense of originality to it or innovation. And that's all I'm trying to say is that's going to become harder and harder for you the longer you live, most likely. That's going to be harder and harder to find that really fresh experience that knocks you off your socks the older you get.
Yeah.
And that's the unfortunate thing about life.
I would say that we've grown up in this era of video games where there was a lot of originality because people were figuring it out.
Yeah.
No one knew what a video game was at one point in time.
That's true.
You know, they've layered and layered and layered, and a lot of this layering was done by companies that are still around and still doing a great job innovating, like Nintendo. Like, it's just insane when you look back at what Nintendo did in the timeline, and other companies that were trying to do similar things but not hitting the same notes, like Capcom or Konami, where they were still making good games. But you see that, like, through the 80s. I mean, almost every video game company in the 80s is like writing the rules for how video games work. And then a little bit into the 90s, and then with the 3D revolution, you saw some of that.
You saw some more.
But we're not going to hit like some 4D revolution, or I don't even know what at this point. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Like, games, like you're saying, Mike, are mostly arrived at roughly what they're probably going to be for a really long time. Same way that movies and other art forms have gone through similar processes. So what you might see is a Picasso come along and do something totally out of left field that's not for the mass market, but is original, but hard to sell. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But the originality through the 80s was the mass market and originality at the same time. Like, Mario Brothers appealed to everybody, and it was like doing just totally groundbreaking. Moving forward, the groundbreaking stuff's probably going to be more niche, smaller, weirder, probably a lot weirder. That's just like, that's just a guess. But so there will probably still be original experiences to be had, but the chances of those original experiences being targeted to you might be lower and lower moving forward. You know?
Yeah, I would say that for me personally, one way that I've been able to keep, gaming something fresh for me is I actually enjoy games very differently from how I used to when I was younger. Like, when I was younger, it was like the thought process was, I'm going to get this game, I'm going to put it in a thing, I'm just going to play and play and play. And the entire experience was about me in the game, like the connection with me in the game. And I feel like I don't know the last time I even freaking did that. Like, it's almost entirely, for me, gaming is an experience of analyzation. How can I turn this into interesting content for other people to enjoy? And so, like, my experience with video games is almost seen under an entirely different lens at this point in my life. And that's still very exciting for me. And I enjoy that so much that that's how I just pursue playing games at this point. I'm sure at some point, like, even that will start to get really boring for me. I will feel like I have said or seen it all under that way of enjoying them. And I'll have to find some other way. But it's kind of the same way with movies too. Like, I don't ever just go to a movie just to sit back and, like, relax and watch a movie. Generally speaking, I'm usually, like, analyzing choices. Like, oh, why did they do this or that? Like, it's just a very different way of experiencing something, and that's what's been keeping entertainment fresh for me. Since I've been getting older, and I feel like I've seen this movie before, I've seen this kind of story before, or whatever. I can still look at individual choices, look at how they combined it in their sort of, with the director's unique personality or touch or whatever, and glean new things from what they're doing. I'm not saying that, like, for anyone who just sits down, plays a game they can't enjoy. I'm not trying to say anything like that. I'm just saying that if you find yourself in a position where, like, I feel like something's stale, I feel like I've seen this before, I feel like there's no originality anymore, one way that maybe you can help mitigate that is to sort of change the way that you experience them, change the way you look at them, and maybe that can help. That's been my personal experience with gaming, anyways.
Paradigm shift, boy.
Yep.
Yeah. That's kind of essentially what happened to me with, like, movies and stuff. Like, a few days ago I watched Thor 3. Thor Ragnarok. It's not a bad movie, and most people, I don't know, people may not appreciate as much maybe what I'm about to say, because I don't watch superhero movies anymore. Thor 3 is hilarious. It's got crazy special effects. It is, in some ways, it's like it's a perfect film, right? It's almost too perfect. In fact, the combination of humor and violence and, like, just the way the characters look and talk and interact, and the visual effects and the way everything, like, works together is so perfect that it almost seems like wrong. And I remember as I was watching that movie, I just, every now and then, I just kept being like, I was out of the film almost the whole time. I wasn't in. I didn't see Thor 2, so that may have had something to do with it.
I could bring it.
But it's so self-referential. It's so, like, into its own, like, niche. It was just so strange. And I attribute partially my non-love, I don't want to say disdain, because they're good movies and I'm willing to admit it. But my non-love of superhero movies, I have to attribute it to my visual effects background. I think is I like things. It's not just that things don't impress me. It's more that, like you were saying, Mike, it's you're analyzing things now. It's like, oh, I know how they did that. Like, a lot of the magic that I had back when Lord of the Rings came out, or some other movies I loved, like, since then, like the Harry Potter movies and stuff, it's not there anymore because I have come so far, and I guess we made YouTube videos for a while for fun, but, like, it's not like I'm a filmmaker because I haven't made a film yet, but the background of studying film has kind of, like, ruined movies for me in to some degree. But I think it's a good thing as far as, like, horror films go, because horror films aren't scary to me anymore. I used to never watch horror films. They're so freaky. Now when I watch them, I'm like, holy cow, I know how they did this. I know how they got this effect. I know where this act is going. I know, like, which characters are not going to live anymore. And the more you learn about it, the less scary it gets, but the more interesting it gets. And because movies do keep innovating, even though the innovations aren't as original as we would hope for them to be. You look at things and you see the little things they're doing differently, and you start noticing those things more. And sure, it's not scary anymore, but it's more enjoyable on a different level. So that's the only thing I can equate it to.
There's that experience curve, right, where, like, you start out and it's like everything's new and exciting, and it's like boom, like, shoots way up. Like, this is crazy. I'm learning a new thing. Every sentence I read about this is blowing my mind.
Yeah, yeah.
And then there's that middle ground where you're at that sort of amateur stage
where you think you know a lot.
Where you think you've figured it all out, right, and you don't know how much you don't know.
Exactly.
Like, right? And then the professionals, they're the ones that actually almost have a drop in that, where they're like, they start to realize how swamped they are, and, like, there's so much to know, and they start to realize how little they truly know in the grand, the big picture. So it's interesting. Yeah, anyone who develops expertise in something, you follow that path. Where it was like there was that really exciting period of time. I feel like 2008, 2009, 2010, maybe into 2011, where we used to just watch movies, like, all the time, just
all the time
with it, and then just talk about, like, how did they do this and what, and then but so a lot of my favorite movies are movies that came out around then.
Totally.
We bring up, or at least I think we all bring this up, but I find myself constantly referencing There Will Be Blood and No Country for Old Men.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
Two movies that came out in the same year.
The Pixar movies of that year or the Wall-E, Up, Toy Story 3. Those are the best.
That's right before Pixar started to look like
exactly
Invincible. Yeah. So I see that with other things, and that might be kind of what you're talking about too with video games, Mike. Is like there's that phase where it's just like everything's new, and then after a while it's like everything's not new.
Right. And it's funny that coincides with when we started getting way into filmmaking and started a YouTube channel and started doing visual effects. That's around the time where the enjoyment of movies, at least for me, started to go down a little.
It's actually a very good point.
As much anymore, right?
I don't watch them as much anymore. And when I do decide to watch a movie, it's because I'm expecting to be in some way surprised by it. I'm expecting to go into that and saying, like, I've never seen camera work like this before. Now I really got to see that. I've never seen visual effect quite like that before, or a look like this for a film before, or something like that. I got to go see that. Because there's hopefully something new, something exciting that's going to be there that I haven't seen before. But I very rarely go to see movies, and usually it's a niche movie that takes a lot of risks and that doesn't have a huge budget. And
have you guys seen Baby Driver? Yeah.
No, I haven't. But Kevin Spacey's in that, right? So
he is.
That story's getting a lot of hate. That movie.
No, I haven't seen it.
It was weird to watch because Kevin Spacey's in it. I was like,
but that was Edgar Wright, right?
It's Edgar
and he's
freaking Wright,
really
who is one of the
dude.
Most genius directors of our time.
Absolutely.
That movie I had read. See, these days I usually do a lot of reading about a movie, not about the story, because generally that's not like what's really pulling me in. Generally, it's the technical aspect of like it was an amazing feat. Like they did something really difficult, like you're saying, Mike. Like there's something.
They got a baby to drive.
They taught a baby to drive a car. Let's see that. It's usually that kind of stuff. And so, like Baby Driver, I read this whole big old thing about the guy who was the editor for it, and they edited that movie as they shot it. Really? So he had an editing kiosk. They would get a shot. They would kick it over to the guy, be like, "Does it line up?" Because they had an animatic. Because the whole movie's lined with music. 90% of it is time.
So they composed
because he's got
first.
the headphones on.
Yeah. Okay. Well, like composed, like their existing songs, like. So he's listening to an iPod, right?
Right.
So like they had the songs, they had all the beats they had to hit, and so like they would get a shot and they'd go down to the dude, be like, "Does it line up? Does it hit our beats?" And it was like, "Yes, okay, cool." They could move on, and they edited it as they shot. And I was like, "That sounds insane. I gotta freaking see this." So I saw it, and it really blew my mind.
See, that's the type of thing you could never have done with film,
right?
Back in the
day. Take that, Chris Nolan! Take that, dude!
Someone always said there's nothing that you can do with digital you can't do with film. There's one.
Yep, that is one. That's totally
definitely one.
Absolutely one that cannot be done.
That is crazy, though. I kind of want to see Baby Driver now.
Yeah, it's more intense than I thought it was going to be, but holy crap. It's just like the whole, because they could tune the pacing, you know, with the animatic and the music, it's just like paced perfectly well the whole way through, and it's really weird to experience because it's like this is what was in the dude's head, and you can tell it came out of his head almost perfectly intact. You know, people talk about auteur theory and like, you know, the influence a director has. 90% of the time the director is like a manager making executive decisions, but not the originator of most of it. You know what I mean? Like mostly they're just the one keeping the reins on everything and making it feel consistent. Yeah. This is where I saw it and I was like, holy crap, this came straight out of this dude's head. Like
that's
just as it was. Everyone passed it down. Yeah. This is the one film I've seen where I'm not big on auteur theory in general.
Because there's so many people involved.
It's worthless to talk about, to be honest. It's like, okay, this thing that 300 people made, like who's the one guy we're gonna say really made it?
Yeah. Oh, and this is
a waste of time. But this is the one thing I've seen where it was like everyone they lobotomized him, they chopped his skull off and they took his brain out and everyone just delicately handed it down an assembly line. Nobody did anything to it.
Yeah.
Anyways, so it's awesome.
That's crazy.
The question, how much does originality count for a game being good? I have to say, like, not much. Like, to bring it all back to just that one question right there. Originality it's huge, it's important, it innovates, it moves the whole medium forward, right? But it is not, in my opinion, it is not one of the necessary things that a good game has to have.
Yeah. Don't have to have originality. If you do, you have a real good chance with right execution that it could be mind-blowing. But you don't have to have it to have a good game.
Totally.
And I think you mentioned that, but maybe you're talking about enjoyment. How much does it go into making you enjoy it?
Oh, is that more what he's talking about?
I'm just saying if that's what he's talking about.
If it is, it definitely counts a lot. My favorite games of all time have been the original. Anytime you are showing someone a game, because I've been going through this recently, me and my wife just finished Final Fantasy VII. Anytime you're going through a game and you have to say, well, now listen, for its time, right? That's when that game was super original, but every game since it has built upon that originality. And the games nowadays aren't as original, but in a lot of ways they're better. But you have to judge it by the frame of reference of originality. Okay, now that I deleted all the past 20 years from my mind, yeah, Final Fantasy VII is the greatest thing I've ever even thought of, right? But anytime you have to do that, you're covering for something. You're having to say, like, okay, well, yeah, the gameplay's kind of weird. Yeah, the dialogue's weird. Yeah, they screwed up translating it. Okay, these polygons are like not on the surface plane at all. But isn't it still kind of good if you think about it, right? And that anytime you have to do that, you're essentially accounting for things that were bad about a game, and you're making up for it with originality. And I don't think that when you're being objective that should account for anything.
Dude, isn't it weird that video games are like pretty much the only form of software that people go back and want to like experience a really, really, really old version of? Like normally
the original,
people don't want to go back and boot up Windows 3.0 and be like, sick.
Every now and then,
Windows 3.0,
yeah,
this is
right.
legendary.
Yeah.
Like, can you believe like they influenced the whole industry with these concepts?
My gosh.
And like all this crap is like there might
or
be
go
someone
back
out
to
there that
dial
does
up and be like, oh man, dial-up internet for its time was so good. You got to try it out.
someone writing up their essay on a typewriter like, fetching,
Yeah, dude.
dude, this started it all.
Can
the
you
QWERTY.
believe? Yeah. Who thought? Yeah, the QWERTY. Who came up with that? Oh my gosh, it's revolutionary. Yeah, it's crazy. That is essentially what we're dealing with, and it's important from a historical perspective, but it can't be factored in to an objective analysis of a game being good or not. That's my. I don't know how you can.
You heard it here first. Casey thinks Final Fantasy VII is a bad game.
1408, is that a reference to the Stephen King story 1408, room 1408?
Oh, GWIP 14. Oh, the one with
the movie John
Cusack.
Saxon.
No,
right?
dude, GWIP was born in 1408.
Oh, fetch!
It's one of the two. I don't know which one.
He's
He's been
around the block.
He's
been around the block. That's why he's having such a hard time with all these original. These games aren't original anymore. Back in 1408, that's when games were original as fetch.
You're trying to talk to him about, as you get older, you'll understand. And this guy's freaking 500, Mike.
I know. That's what am I talking about? I'm a
You're
young
preaching to the
whippersnapper in his mind. Okay.
Right, we're good there.
Let's move on to Yuns of Provo. Final question. What are some examples of story elements in games that are typically considered bad that actually are good to you due to personal experience or subjectivity? This could also mean a change in opinion. For example, I had problems with Final Fantasy XV story due to not having enough time with Luna to care about her fate. However, my oldest brother passed away yesterday, and I've thought a lot about lost time. And I didn't know him as well as my other siblings I grew up with. Luna's fate means a little more to me now that I think of it in a different context. I feel that it was much more of, I love this person, but I don't just think of them, or I just don't think all the time. Oh, hold on, I totally screwed this up. I love this person, but now I just think of all the time I could have had, instead of the time you did have with them. This is the concept of loss that is much different than is typically explored.
Wow, that's deep.
So, first of all, very sorry to hear about the loss of your brother. Condolences for that. I was just with you a couple weeks ago, so I really feel for you. I'm sorry to hear that. This is a topic that was brought up. I think the video that I made about Final Fantasy XV's setup and payoff, it was the first video I did. Understanding Story is a kind of an ongoing series I've been working on. For the most part, people received that video extremely well, agreed with most things I said. The one point where there was a sort of more contention or more disagreement for what there was in the video was on her, like, in talking about how we didn't have enough time to get to know that character to care about her when she died. And this is the exact point they brought up. The point was that Noctis is upset about what could have been, not about what he had and lost. And that idea of loss, or that sort of like, you know, take on what loss is for certain people, is, yeah, something that I think very few people probably understood the way that Noctis was experiencing it in the game, and unfortunately maybe the way that you understand it now. And so this has been something that's been sort of a reoccurring thing for me as I've been making Final Fantasy content for the channel. I was very hard on Final Fantasy V the first time around I reviewed that game. And I remember the one thing that convinced me, okay, I need to replay this game again, was that I received a private message, and the guy was like, hey, I watched your video, and, you know, usually I really agree with everything you say. This one was a little different for me because you criticized the storytelling, and you criticized how silly it was, and you criticized this and that. And it's like, you know, but for me, I grew up, and in my country, this is what a lot of the fairy tales and the fairy stories are like. And they follow very similar patterns in the way that they're told. And so this, for me, was very nostalgic. It felt like the kind of stories I grew up with. And so they resonated a lot with me. And that just like floored me when I read that. I was like, dude, like, I have been looking at this. It changed my entire perception of what good analysis is. Like, I had at that point been using my growing platform on YouTube to just elevate my own opinion, to just be like, see how I think about it. If you don't think about it this way, you don't have good taste, or you're stupid, or whatever. Like, that was literally how I used to think. I used to be much more critical of things. These guys probably remember around that time, like, every movie that came out, I was like tearing it apart, like hardcore. Like hardcore. I was
Yeah.
extremely critical. And it was because I believe my mindset was really narrow at the time, where I was looking at it only from my own experience, my own understanding, my own way of thinking about something.
That's kind of what Landon was talking about with that curve,
Yeah.
where you start out at nothing and you get to a point where you think you know a lot.
Yeah.
And in reality, you're an amateur, but you know more than most people, and so you think that you know a lot, and you don't know what you don't know. And so you act on what you know. And as you know, that curve eventually brings you back down to earth eventually, when you realize exactly how much you don't know.
Yeah.
And this kind of comment, I think.
Yeah. And so, you know, I took that and I was like, wow, that's really crazy. I replayed the game, looking at it from the perspective of this particular viewer. And it was like I had a whole different appreciation for Final Fantasy V. And I did the same thing with 8, which I had a very hard time the first time around with, and enjoyed it more. Then I did it again with more feedback, and I enjoyed it even more. So that's not to say that, well, if you just change your perspective, you're gonna eventually appreciate Quest 64. Just
I was going to say, does this apply to all games or what?
Right. Like, there are some levels, some standards that have got to be set, drawn in the sand. Like, this is just not good game design. That right. Exists, right? This is not good storytelling. There are certain things where I think you can more clearly and more confidently say that. But I think this particular point about Luna in Final Fantasy 15, and others that I've had in my discussions about FF8 and FF5, I think, for those of you who are familiar with, say, Spoonie, he was real popular a few years back with his reviews of Final Fantasy games, later Final Fantasy games, and his just entire deconstructive, like, rants about how bad they were, right? He makes lots of really good points. I enjoy the videos. He has really good comedic sense and timing, and I know a lot of it's probably exaggerated for comedic effect. I enjoy the videos, but he sees nothing good in them. and it's clear to me that there is a certain like perspective you can get locked into, where if something doesn't fall within this extremely narrow view you have, then it sucks. And there are ways to widen that. There are ways to look at things in another person's shoes or from another person's point of view and gain appreciation for them, even if you don't entirely agree. That can sort of, you can reach a form of compromise that just makes it easier to enjoy things in life. And so, yeah, I think that personal experience has almost everything to do with how you receive something, whether positive or negative. And again, if you lock that down and you're only looking at the world from the way that you see it and you experience it, you're going to miss out on so many things that you can learn and enjoy. And so that's been my experience in YouTube game, video creation and criticism. And again, yeah, I think that you're right about that. And once you've experienced something, then you see it in the game, it has a totally different effect. There was somebody who was talking to me recently about, or maybe they weren't talking to me, it was a comment somewhere. They were playing a certain game at the time that their father passed away. Maybe it was Final Fantasy VII or Xenogears or something. And it was like, I can't go back and play that game. I can't. My experience, what I remember, what I feel, are locked to the time 1997 when this person that was close to me passed away, and it just brings that up. That person's experience totally affects the way they see something, and I think it has a huge effect. So, yeah, that's what I was saying.
That was. I feel like that was a really good answer, actually, Mike. I don't have a ton to add there. I know that there's very few story elements that would be considered like universal, from
the
islands in the Pacific to the center of Africa to East Asia to North America, and the ones that are archetypes and things that humanity has been telling stories of things about these general subjects for 100,000 years. That like when you're judging something in a story as being bad, I feel like a lot of times that can be mitigated just by the director or whoever is the storyteller being, the word like honest, or being sincere would probably be a better word. If the story is made from a place of sincerity, not everyone will understand it, right? But there will be value there in some way. The story behind the creators of Quest 64, I don't know what their personal experiences were. I don't know why they made a game. I don't know
what was their level of sincerity when developing that.
Exactly. I don't know what that level, and you can't judge that. You can't know, but you can know when it's done well, and you can feel like you talked about Hellblade for the past few weeks, Mike.
Yeah.
The game came from a place of sincerity.
Yeah, totally.
And how can you tell? I mean, it's just obvious, like you just know it. But when it's not there, either there's two reasons for that. Either they're not sincere, or you missed it. You don't know. Your experiences aren't equivalent to what theirs are. And so to lump both of those things, both that which you don't understand and that which was maybe not sincere to begin with, to lump those both under the word bad, is a mistake. But you don't know what you don't know, like we mentioned before. You don't know. And so there can still be good stories, but be really hesitant when talking about bad things. And I'm bad at this too. But when you call something genuinely bad, you better know not done from a place of sincerity. Because if it was, that in and of itself gives it some sort of value that is going to, that other people are going to identify with, and it then can be considered not bad objectively, even if a few people find value in it. That alone, in my opinion, makes it not bad. Doesn't mean it's good, but when you label things bad, anyways, I think you get my point. Yon's a problem. I'm sorry, man.
That's a good answer. Really good answer.
Yeah. And especially as you get older, I mean, then you know more. And the experience of people dying close to you that you have at a young age. But some people do. But then as you get older, that becomes more common, and those people can then identify with those things in a way they would never have before.
Yeah. I think really good stories have layers to them in a way that they can be unlocked. Not that they're obvious on their face, but that with a little bit of secret information, hidden information, life experience, you all of a sudden can see, you can fill in the gaps, read between the lines, and all of a sudden realize what was really going on. We see this happen in our lives just in getting adult jokes that we didn't realize weren't even jokes. But that sort of stuff happens, right? It's just like you get older and all of a sudden you realize like, ooh, dang, I had no idea. That's what the context of this was. That was the subtext or whatever. And so I think like I haven't played Final Fantasy 15 more than the first 10 hours or so. And I don't have any plans to. So
I do when the mobile version comes out.
So I can't speak to like the specifics of the example of Luna here specifically, but I do know that something that it's hard to find the right word for this, but something that on the internet have a very, very bad reputation of it's bandwagoning. And people can follow a snowball kind of effect of like everyone else is ripping on this, so I'm gonna rip on this or whatever, or oh, it's so bad, oh, so many people downvoted this comment, I'm gonna go downvote it too. There's a human effect to that, but I do believe in my experience that Final Fantasy 15 has been the victim of some degree of bandwagoning, whether that comes from different areas in different ways. But it's always interesting to me when you look at a game and you look at it on Amazon, look at the reviews on Amazon, and compare them. When Final Fantasy 15 came out, I remember looking at this in Japan, in North America, and it was really weird to see like the something about the cultural context or the greater online conversation, because there's language barriers there, people's opinions somehow, you know what I mean? Or whether it be the translation or whatever. But I do believe that it's really easy to give a AAA budget video game, especially when it comes to things like this. And that doesn't mean that everyone's secretly creating art. No one appreciates it in their time until like all these developers are dead. I'm not saying anything like that, but
Van Gogh.
Yeah, but it's not uncommon for people at the time to not appreciate something. And so we talked about this last week with Final Fantasy 13 and how all of a sudden people are saying, oh, dang, okay, sweet, this is great. That can come in so many different ways, but I think with time, if something is even remotely sincere, with time, certain aspects will shine through eventually. And then for you yourself, there's some stories that person that movies or reread books usually, but the ones that I do reread or rewatch, it's because I'm still getting something out of it. You know what I mean? I'm watching it and I'm still kind of pulling things together. I feel like I've always felt that way about Inception. I've always felt like I can keep watching this.
Yeah.
And we did actually a lot when it
finally
came out. We watched it a bunch of times over, and so I think that's the hallmark of something that's been really well crafted, be it a story or whatever else. It's something you can go back to and see. And so there's a lot of books and things like that. Like, and it's weird because reading like Children of Huron, for example, reading something that's a tragedy, that's absolutely like awful things happening to people, entertainment can sometimes make you, I don't know, it's weird. You don't want to put yourself completely in that character's shoes because it's so miserable, but at the same time you're reading it kind of as entertainment and thought to be entertained by something like that. But I think the good stories have those real human connections that come through. And so, you know, like I can't say Final Fantasy 15 is a good story because like I said, I've played the game, but I think that my life personally. So yeah, Jens-Provo, that really sucks, man. We're sorry to hear that.
Yeah. I think that may be one of the, when you have a story that's crafted by, you know, most of it at least, by two different people, right? You know, thinking that maybe Tetsuya Nomura was more sincere about the story he was trying to tell than maybe the person who took over after he was forced out of it, right? And now you have to decide how sincerely this game was made, or the story that's being told, or the characters that you're following through. Tabata's not sincere. I'm just using it as an example for how things can kind of get messed up when a project changes hands like this, you know? And maybe it wasn't done the way it should have been done, but the story's still there, and the theme, the time you could have had, it's still there. As powerful as it would have otherwise been, if that theme were more sincerely considered through the part of the developers. I don't know if
that's true, because people can give something like short shrift, so to speak. Like they can not give something its fair shake or treat it inappropriately, I guess you could say. And yeah,
that would be like someone else finishing up Vincent van Gogh's paintings after he died and touching it and
inappropriate.
And that's a really heavy thing to talk about, but
for sure.
So I haven't quite had that exact experience yet, Yunza Provo. I have a few brothers. That would be very devastating, and it would definitely change. I look at things for sure, and I can't relate at the moment. But that I have had other people in my life die, and that definitely changes the way you look at things.
Well, dude, so like 2 weeks ago, I was going through genealogy stuff, family history stuff with Krista. We were looking at some of her side of the family because she hadn't looked at a lot of that before. And it's just nuts to just go through this and be like, a lot of these people, it's like, oh my gosh, these people had like 3 kids die, and you know, this person's wife
used
died.
to be so common.
You just add all this stuff up, and it's just like the net, just like some experience all funneling down into a person. And for us, our lives are pretty good for the most part. For, you know, given the circumstances, it's really easy.
The past, given where we come from.
You go back, I feel like modern medicine has kind of improved, and I feel like people are a little bit more separated from death now than humans probably have ever been. And as a theme, we play so many violent games, you watch so many violent movies and things like that it can feel like, oh, they killed so and so is going to die. You know, you're watching something,
it becomes
they're going to die.
Not all serious
from that. But like with our mom, when her mom died, our mom cannot watch any movie anymore.
Right, you're right.
And she passed away 10 years ago.
6?
It was 11 years ago.
Yeah.
It's been a long time. It's been over a decade. And I remember we were sitting down, we were watching Gravity, and I'm going to spoil Gravity. There's really not much to spoil about Gravity.
It's been 6 years,
but it's an early spoiler.
Yeah, it happens early.
So like when George Clooney's character is like hanging on, and my mom's sitting there in the room, she's like, "Is he going to die?" And she looked, "Is he going to die?" And I'm sitting there like, "Just watch it, just watch." And she's like, "Is he going to die?" And I was like, "Well, you know," she's like, "I can't watch this." And she got up and she left. And she went off and she went shopping. The movie was over. And it was like, dang, it's really, there's so much of this in the media that we consume, but it's really easy to have it so separated from the real human experience.
Yeah.
And for the people that do, like you, Yunza Provo, they're seeing it through a completely different lens from most of the rest of us. So that could be a tough burden to, for sure.
Oh yeah. Oh, absolutely. Well, thanks everybody for contributing to these discussions. I'm always just blown away by how many of you guys just like want us to keep talking about games every single week. We love it. We love creating these videos for you. We love your feedback in the comments, and appreciate you guys listening and supporting the podcast. So if you're listening to this audio only, you can find us on YouTube at Dark Pixel Gaming. Currently, right now, in the middle of a long Final Fantasy XIII analysis set of videos. The 4th episode will be out on Thursday. which is tomorrow for in your perspective for when you're listening to this. I'll be talking about linearity and field map design and exploration. So that'll be fun. If any of you have not been following that, what I've been doing for that is I've been having people submit like their thoughts on these different topics. So feel free to send me a message on Facebook or Twitter or here on YouTube or on Discord. Join our Discord. That's in the description box. And I'll include your thoughts in the videos. I do that in order to sort of get my thoughts together based on the things we've basically just talked about in the last couple of topics, so that I can have a wider view of perspective on the games before I do the official reviews. So that's what we're doing right now. There's still several more videos to go through. Mostly going to be talking about gameplay moving forward. So see you guys then. And have a lovely week. We'll see you on the podcast again next week. Peace out.
Yeah.
Peace.